Okay, Bishop. Start the music.
You know, people might not get this reference unless they watched Monday Night Football in the 90s.
Yeah, I get that, but it'll be fine.
There's not much chance of that.
Well, it's podcast time. All of my research has been done. I think I'd better finish recording before Hank Williams beats me up. I've got a huge quantity of notes and extracted all the sounds now. If I only had a singing voice, I wouldn't be letting you down. Yeah, this whole intro song thing might be ill-advised, but Jaguar sports games need extra help, so I'll give it a try. Now, are you ready? Are you ready for a podcast? A day or night party? I'm your host Shinto, and here with Bishop, we'll get this episode started. Yeah, my singing is weak, the whole show won't be this lame. It's Troy Aikman football here on Atari Jaguar Game by Game. You're right, Bishop, that wasn't very good at all. No emulators were used in the production of this podcast. That's awesome, sweetie. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the Atari Jaguar Game by Game podcast. This is the show where we take a good long look at Atari's last home video game console, and especially its library, one game at a time. Whether you love or hate sports games on the Jaguar, or are surprised any sports games existed at all, I'm glad you're here. I am Shinto, your third-string quarterback for this episode, where we will attempt to rack up yardage and maybe even score a touchdown or two in part number 21942, Troy Aikman NFL Football. Troy Aikman NFL Football is a 2MB cartridge, an American football game for up to 2 competitive players, developed by Telegames and published by Williams Entertainment around the first quarter of 1995. It carries a pre-ESRB rating of A for all ages. Tradewest developed this game for Williams Entertainment on the Genesis and Super Nintendo. I talked about Tradewest and Williams and their relationship in episode 19 for Double Dragon 5, so I won't rehash that information here, and the same goes for Telegames, who developed this game for the Atari Jaguar. Telegames was discussed in detail in episode 18, Brutal Sports Football, so what I will talk about is this Troy Aikman guy. Troy Aikman is a retired professional football player. That's American football. Every time I say football in this episode, I'm going to be referring to American football, the kind with touchdowns and tackles, not red cards and goalies. Aikman played for 12 years as quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, recruited as a first-round draft pick in 1989. In 1992, he broke Joe Montana's record for the most consecutive completed passes without an interception, 89, and the following year he led the Cowboys to a lopsided victory in Super Bowl 27, where he was named the most valuable player. A concussion in the NFC Championship game the following season slowed him down, but the Cowboys still won Super Bowl 28, thanks largely to their defense and the running game led by Emmitt Smith. Super Bowl 30, again a couple years later, the Dallas Cowboys won, so Aikman was definitely a big name in professional football when this game came out. 1994 on the Genesis and Super Nintendo, and 1995 on the Jaguar. Besides lending his name and likeness to the game, Troy Aikman drew up some of his favorite plays and also rated each position for each team on a scale of 1 to 4, so some teams may have a stronger defense or a better running game or whatever. He says he, quote, made sure every team is different and emphasizes a different style of play.
Ready, set, hike!
As I said, Telegames handled the conversion for Williams. The work was mostly done by a developer named Richard Wong. Mr. Wong graduated from LSU with a bachelor's in computer science and completed his master's at Texas A&M. He worked for a little while at a company called SoftDisk, based in Shreveport, Louisiana. Does that sound familiar to you at all? If you've listened to the Wolfenstein 3D or Doom episodes, it should, because SoftDisk is where id Software was born. And Mr. Wong did work at the company at the same time as id founders John Romero, John Carmack, Adrian Carmack,
no relation,
and Tom Hall. Mr. Wong went from SoftDisk to Micrographics in Richardson, Texas, then started at Telegames at the beginning of 1993. It looks like he might have left before Troy Aikman NFL Football was finished, and David Mahaffey was there too, working on the game. I mentioned him in the Double Dragon 5 episode since he also worked on that title for Telegames. On August 1st, 1994, Atari announced that Troy Aikman NFL Football was expected to ship by the end of that year. A self-running demo was shown off at the 1994 Summer Consumer Electronics Show. Tal Funkybilou was at the CES reporting on the Jaguar for Atari Explorer Online, and said of the game that the demo was slow and choppy, not much better than the Super Nintendo or Genesis versions. In September of 1994, Atari issued a press release announcing their partnership with Williams Entertainment, and in that press release mentioned that there were radio promotions running for the game in the top 25 markets, still aiming for a November or December release date. The game was shown off again at the Winter Consumer Electronics Show in January 1995, and another press release, dated February of 1995, mentions Troy Aikman NFL Football among the first major wave of third-party titles launching for the Jaguar. Here's what the press release said about the game. Troy Aikman's rendition of football on the 64-bit Jaguar may be the most intense pigskin action you have ever played. Brought to the high-end gaming world from the groundbreaking minds of Williams Entertainment, Troy Aikman Football breaks new barriers in sports entertainment. Up to date with 1995 rules and regulations, players choose among all 28 NFL teams, 3 season modes, multiple difficulty levels, 54 offensive and 27 defensive configurations, 6 field options, variable quarter lengths, and more. And that's all before the excitement really begins, for 1 or 2 players. The game saw release, apparently, around March of 1995. I'll give a brief overview of how American football works if you're not familiar. The game involves 2 opposing teams with 11 players from each team on the field at one time. The field itself is 120 yards long and a little over 53 yards wide. If you want to do the metric math in your head as I talk about the game, a yard is a little under a meter, about 91 centimeters. 10 yards at either end of the field is set aside as the end zone, and the remaining 100 yards is divided in half. The yard numbers count up from 1 on either side, meeting at the 50-yard line at midfield. There are thick white lines every 5 yards, and large white numbers every 10. One team tries to get the ball to the opponent's team end zone to score what's called a touchdown, worth 6 points. The game is pretty well divided into offense and defense, usually with different players on the field, depending on whether or not their team has the ball. The team on offense can drive down the field in increments of 10 yards, running the ball, throwing the ball. They have 4 attempts, called downs, to gain those 10 yards. So what'll happen is the 2 teams will line up on either side of the ball. The line of scrimmage is what it's called. The quarterback will indicate that he's ready for the ball, and then the play begins. The offense will try to get the ball downfield, the defense will try to stop them. Usually the offense has coordinated a certain play, a strategy. You run over here, I'll pretend to hand the ball off to you, but will instead step back and throw it to whoever is downfield and has the best chance of catching the ball. Teams have playbooks that they use and remember and practice. The offense has a certain amount of time to determine their play, line up at the line of scrimmage, and hike the ball, and this is called the play clock. The down will end when the ball carrier is tackled by the defense, pulled down enough that his knee touches the turf or is forced out of bounds, or if the ball is thrown but not caught. Then they pick another play, line up, and try again. If they make those 10 yards, they get what's called a first down. A new 10-yard distance is laid out, and then they have 4 more attempts to get to the next first down marker. Usually, if the offense didn't get their 10 yards by the end of the third down, they'll kick the ball away in what's called a punt. This is done to give the ball to the defense, but make it as hard as possible on the other team by giving them a whole lot of yards they have to earn to go the other way. If the offense didn't punt the ball, if they ran another play but still didn't get a first down, then the defense will take over from that same spot on the field. Sometimes it's good strategy to go for it on fourth down, and sometimes it isn't. Now, if the offense is close enough, they can try for a field goal. At either end of the field, past the end zone, there is a giant blocky yellow Y-shaped structure called goalposts or uprights. If the offense can kick the ball through the uprights, then they get 3 points. Now, as I said, a touchdown yields 6 points, and after a touchdown, the offense gets one more play. They have the option of either kicking the ball through the uprights at close range for an extra point, or they can try to run or pass the ball into the end zone again for 2 points. This is called a 2-point conversion and was officially adopted in the NFL in 1994, which is why Troy Aikman NFL Football makes a point of saying that this scoring option is available. The games last 1 hour, split into 4 15-minute quarters, but there are so many ways that the clock can stop that in real life games last much longer. Each team gets 3 timeouts per half, and there's an automatic timeout for both teams around the 2-minute mark before halftime and before the end of the game, and this is appropriately called the 2-minute warning. Those are the basics. There's a whole lot of nuance that I'm skipping over, and pretty much all of the rules and penalties, but that stuff will probably shake out as I go along. Hopefully.
Ready, set, hut, hike!
There are 2 main game modes here in Troy Aikman NFL Football. You can either be a player or the head coach. As the player, you're out there running, throwing, tackling. But as the coach, you call the plays, and then the computer runs them while you stand on the sidelines, maybe yelling or kicking things when stuff goes wrong. The yelling and kicking is not actually implemented in Troy Aikman NFL Football. You'll have to handle that in real life. So if you're just interested in the strategy of football and not necessarily doing everything yourself, then you might prefer coach mode, but it's really just a subset of player mode. Either player mode or coach mode can be used by 1 or 2 human players. You can't mix and match. Both are players or both are coaches, and both are on opposing teams. You can also choose a 0-player mode, a demo mode, where the computer plays itself. You can choose to play in a single preseason game, a full season using the 1994 schedule, or a season that you customize yourself. The preseason games are basically like a one-off pickup game, choose 2 teams and play. Kind of like versus mode on a one-on-one fighting game, but with fewer fireballs. Alright, no fireballs. Playing the full season, you pick a team to start and go through all 16 games in the regular season, and into the playoffs if you did well enough compared to other teams in your division. Oh, I should talk about that. The NFL at the time was split up into 2 conferences, AFC and NFC, and each of those split into 3 geographic divisions, East, West, and Central, and each of those divisions had 4 or 5 teams. You play each team in your own division twice, and a smattering of other teams throughout the NFL in a 16-game season, both from your conference and from the other conference. Today it's different. You have 32 teams and 4 divisions in each conference, 4 teams per division. So in Troy Aikman NFL Football, you won't have the Jacksonville Jaguars or Carolina Panthers or Baltimore Ravens or Tennessee Titans or Houston Texans. The Raiders were in Los Angeles, the Chargers in San Diego, and Houston had a team called the Oilers. If you're into NFL history, today these older teams and locations and uniforms may seem like a fun throwback. You'd see the older uniforms and logos for the Buccaneers, the Broncos, the Bills, and even some teams which don't begin with the letter B, like the New York Giants.
All hail the New York Giants!
The New York Jets. No cheering for the Jets, apparently. The Seahawks and the Chargers. There might be more I missed, sorry, but those I mentioned are the ones that stood out to me. The top teams from each division go into the playoffs, as well as 3 other teams per conference, non-division leaders with the best records. These latter teams are called wildcard teams. So you have 3 rounds of playoffs in this game: the wildcard round, the divisional round, and the conference championship round. After that, it's Super Bowl time, the NFC champion versus the AFC champion. The other type of season in this game besides preseason and the 94-95 season is custom. You can define a custom season, but more on that later. Some other game options available here are the length of each quarter. This can be set to 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or the full 15 minutes. You can set the difficulty level, either rookie, pro, or veteran. Exact behavioral differences between these is hard to tell. There's only one documented difference, and that's the play clock. In rookie mode, your play clock is set to 45, so 45 seconds to select your play and hike the ball. In the other modes, it's 30 seconds. Another difference I found in the GamePro review of this game, where it says that in Veteran you have to push the B button to catch the ball. Catching is not automatic. You can turn penalties on or off. If they're turned off, you only get 1 penalty, delay of game, which occurs when you're on offense, but don't hike the ball before the play clock expires. Other penalties when enabled include illegal procedure, unnecessary roughness, roughing the kicker, and offsides. In real life, illegal procedure can include multiple different infractions. It could be in illegal formation, something like not enough players on the line of scrimmage, or wide receivers not lined up on the outside ends. Also, illegal procedure could be a false start on the offense, or if a player goes out of bounds during a punt and then re-enters the field. But here in Troy Aikman NFL football, the only time I was called for illegal procedure was when a kickoff sailed out of bounds, which is a thing in real life too. Unnecessary roughness and roughing the kicker, those are fairly self-explanatory. For offsides, well, I found that when you're on defense, encroaching in the neutral zone before the ball is hiked is an immediate offsides penalty. I'm pretty sure at the time you were only offsides if the ball was snapped before you made it back to your side, or if you made contact with an offensive player before the ball was hiked. That's not the case here in this game. Place 1 foot over and it immediately costs you 5 yards. Each penalty results in a loss of yardage for the offending teams, 5 yards, 10 yards, 15 yards. It could mean a re-kick, like if the defense got hit with a penalty during a kicking play. If both offense and defense had penalties at the same time, those penalties can offset. If the penalized team is close enough to their own goal line, fewer than the typical penalty yardage, it ends up being half the distance to the goal line. I'm not just talking football in general. All these penalty aspects are included in Troy Aikman. What's not supported, I don't think, is the ability to decline a penalty. Sometimes it's good strategy to decline a penalty, but I didn't see that option here. The holding penalty is oddly absent in this game, offensive or defensive. Also, pass interference. These are fairly common in real life. What else? Other options in the game. If this is a preseason game, you can choose the type of field you'll be playing on, and there are 6 of these: grass field, artificial surface, dirt, mud, wet, and snow-covered. During a regular season, you'll encounter these different playing surfaces as you go along, and they can affect things like the number of turnovers in a game. Finally, you have the option of turning on or off sound effects and or music. There's no in-game music per se, so turning off the music would only affect the title screen, setup, halftime, and the end of the game.
Ready, set, hut, hike! Incomplete.
Resource management is another aspect of Troy Aikman NFL football. Each position has a monetary value attached to it. For offense, these positions are quarterback, halfback, fullback, wide receiver, tight end, kicker/punter, and offensive line. On defense, the positions are safety, cornerback, linebacker, and defensive line. Each of these positions has a number of stars next to it, 1 through 4, the stars indicating how well-funded that position is, as it turns out. Each team has a starting set of stars for each position, roughly corresponding to how each team performed in the 1993-94 NFL season, as rated by Troy Aikman himself. I know this game on the Jaguar claims to play the 94-95 season, but I don't think the stats match that season. The schedule may match, but not the team stats, the number of stars. Take a look, for example, at the Houston Oilers. In the 1993-94 season, the Oilers did well, finishing 12-4 and landing in the playoffs as the number 2 seed. In 1994-95, the Oilers finished at the bottom of their division, 2-14, below the Bengals. The Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals really stunk around that time, and in Troy Aikman NFL football on the Jaguar, their starting stats are at the bottom of the league, whereas the Oilers here are pretty solid, mostly 3 stars across the board. That would make sense after the 1992 season, but not after 1993. Also, if you needed further evidence, the Bills finished at the top of the AFC in the 92 season, making it to the Super Bowl, whereas after the 1993 season, they finished below 500. And in the video game, they're among the strongest. You can increase or decrease salary for each of these positions using either $10,000 or $100,000 increments, and you can do this before the start of the game or at halftime. Whether or not this happens in real life, changing someone's salary in the middle of the game, I don't know. It seems like it would be a distraction to me. Also, the idea that simply giving more money to your wide receivers or linebackers or whatever makes them better players seems overly simplistic, but whatever. You start the season with a budget surplus of $100,000, so you can allocate funds to positions that need it. Taking money away from a position, however, only recovers half. So if you give all your excess money to the kicker, then realize maybe later that wasn't such a great idea, you can only take back half of what you gave him. I don't know, maybe it's a union thing. Each time you win a game, you're given an extra $60,000. Each time you lose a game, well, you get nothing. There's no prize for second place. The minimum salary is $120,000. 1 star covers that up through $620,000. 2 stars goes from $630,000 to $1,240,000. 3 stars is $1,250,000 through $1,890,000. And 4 stars is $1,900,000 through $2,500,000, $2.5 million. And that's where it maxes out. Something else you can do here before a game or at halftime is to customize plays. These only persist until you shut off the Jaguar. They're not saved to the cartridge or anything. There are 3 different plays that you can customize. You choose a basic formation, which includes standard, shotgun, run center, run strong, and run weak. You can cycle through the players and change their routes where they should go when the play begins. You can have up to 3 custom plays, which you can choose from your playbook during the game. These can be modified, as I said, before a game or at halftime.
Ready, set, hut, hut, hut!
Gameplay starts with a kickoff. Well, technically the coin toss comes first, and the pre-game report before that, and then Troy's analysis, and optionally the team setup screen from there. Alright, let's back up, but at some point we will get to play the game, honest. The pre-game report summarizes the game that you're about to play, who is playing whom, the week number if you're in season modes, the number of players, the type of field, and the length of the quarters. From here, you can go back to the options screen using the option button, or any other button to continue, though at the bottom of the screen it says press the B button to continue. The coin toss determines who gets the ball first. The visiting team calls it. A is for heads, and C is for tails, and the winner of the coin toss gets to choose whether they want to kick the ball off or receive the ball, A or C buttons, respectively. Roles will be reversed after halftime, so the team that kicks off in the beginning of the game will receive the kickoff to start the second half. After the coin toss, you get Troy's analysis. Troy's analysis compares the 2 teams on each offensive and defensive position, showing the number of stars 1 through 4. The manual says 1 star is weak, 2 stars is average, 3 stars is strong, and 4 stars is outstanding. You see the list of positions down the center of the screen, a team on either side, visitors on the left, home on the right, represented by their respective football helmets facing each other. Fun fact, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the only team in the NFL with an asymmetrical helmet design. The logo appears on the right side of the helmet, but not the left. So on this screen, if the Steelers are the home team with the left-facing helmet, you'd expect it to be all black, no logo at all. And it is, they got that right. I kind of wasn't expecting that, so kudos for that little detail. Let's say you push Option from the Troy's Analysis screen. This takes you to Team Setup, where you can adjust the salaries. Both teams are up there, so 2 players can modify salaries for each offensive and defensive position at the same time. You see the salary for each position, and move the D-pad up or down to highlight the one that you want to modify. The A button will add, C will subtract, and the B button toggles between $10,000 and $100,000 increments. The very bottom of the screen tells you what the buttons do, but I didn't see any on-screen indication of whether I was set to 10,000 or 100,000 increments, which is kinda dangerous since you can only undo 50%. Other parts of the game will show you at the bottom, but that apparently got left out of the Jaguar version. The manual says that injuries will weaken a position. You're told that there's an injury during a game.
Injury on the field.
But you really don't know who was injured, which position, or even which team. You're supposed to save some money at the beginning of the game to mend injuries at halftime, but I'm at a bit of a loss as to how. I assume it's just throwing money at a problem, and I guess you have to know which position, if any, lost a star or two since the last time you were on the team setup screen. I don't know for sure. I do know that the Option button will accept the salaries and go back to Troy's Analysis. Alright, done with that, let's push a button to exit Troy's Analysis, and that takes us not to kickoff, but to the Custom Play screen. Custom Play screen is divided in half, top half, lower half, so that if you had 2 human players, both could be in there editing their plays at the same time. The computer, you don't see him editing a play. To modify your special plays, push the Option button here, and you can choose between which of the 3 special plays you wanted to edit by pushing 1, 2, or 3 on the keypad. The A and C buttons cycle through the formations. These are, as I said, standard, shotgun, run center, run strong, run weak. The B button cycles through the players, and while that player is selected, A and C will cycle between the possible routes. All this information is shown in text on the right third of the screen, and to a lesser extent in the diagram on the remaining 2/3 on the left. I say a lesser extent because the route is only shown in the bottom right corner, not on the diagram. Your receivers are labeled A, B, and C on the diagram, corresponding to the buttons on the controller that'll throw the ball to them, which I'll get into later. You can change the receiver's type by pushing 4 or 6, or the shoulder buttons on your Pro Controller, cycling between wideout, halfback, fullback, and tight end. I didn't see any capability for trick plays, like the halfback pass, the reverse, the flea flicker. You won't find those here. The Option button saves your special plays, again, not to cartridge or anything, just until you turn off the game. And now, finally, kickoff. Let's say you're on the kicking team, there's a kickoff whistle, after which point you gain control over a power meter on screen, basically a kicking gauge, that shows wind direction through the use of a waving flag at the top, an arrow on the horizontal axis for direction left or right, and another arrow on the vertical axis for kicking strength, with the top being the strongest. There's a horizontal white line near the top, though, and if the strength arrow is above this line, then you lose accuracy. Trade accuracy for strength, it makes sense. You can use the D-pad left or right to adjust the direction, and the strength meter moves of its own accord, up or down. But before you lock it in with the B button, there's one other thing that you can do here, and that's call for an onside kick. An onside kick is an interesting strategy in football. I guess it originates in rugby, but in American football, gridiron football, an onside kick is a way to maybe regain possession of the ball. You kick the ball off to the team, but it's a weak kick, off to one side, and it just needs to travel about 10 yards before it can be claimed by either team. If the kicking team can grab the ball after that point and hold on to it, they regain possession. This play has a very low likelihood of success and is typically only used very late in the game when one team is behind and wants to get the ball back as quickly as possible. The downside is that if the play fails, which again it usually does, the opponent gets the ball back in good field position, so they don't have to go very far to score again. But you can also do this for a kickoff, why not? Well, there are many reasons why not, but you can do it anyway. press either A or C to line up your players on one side of the kicker or the other and try for a short kick. Note that in the kicking gauge when it says left or right, it'll be your right, not the kicker's right, dude. You lock that arrow for the strength meter in place with the B button, and then your kicker will automatically kick the ball. Before I go further, I wanted to point out that I typically cover controls in a separate part of my episode outline, but in this game the controls vary depending on a number of factors, and there are a lot of buttons in use here doing different things at different times, so it makes sense to describe the specific controls as I go through the gameplay. They're not adjustable at all, so there's no point for me to abstract them or anything here. So the ball is kicked. If you're on the kicking team, you maintain control of the kicker, and can go in and try to tackle the ball carrier on the receiving team. The receiving team, you'll always be positioned at the bottom of the screen for kickoffs, but the top of the screen for punts. More on that later. In veteran mode, apparently players aren't likely to catch the ball on their own. They have to be told to catch the ball by pressing the B button. I'm not convinced of the accuracy of that statement. I typically push the B button either way. If the ball is kicked into the end zone, you can either try to run the ball out from there, or call for a touchback by simultaneously pressing the 1 and 3 buttons on your keypad. The player will down the ball in the end zone, and play will start 1st and 10 from the 20-yard line. The NFL changed this rule in 2016 to the 25-yard line, but we're talking about an old game here, so a touchback will give you the ball on the 20. It's a risk-reward thing. You might be able to run it past the 20 from inside the end zone, but then again, you might not. Let's say you catch the ball, maybe on the 2-yard line, and there's no touchback option now outside of the end zone, so you run. While you're running, the D-pad controls the direction, forward, backward, left, and right. The A button will dive, the B button will spin, maybe shaking off would-be attackers, and the C button will give you a speed boost. It doesn't make that sound, though. It'd be cool if it did. You can only do one speed boost per play. Also, while you have the ball, you can juke, try to mislead the defense by rapidly pushing one direction on the D-pad and then the other. You can hurdle, leap over players on the ground by pressing 2 or 5. You can stiff arm with your left arm, push away wannabe tacklers with either the 1 or 6 on the keypad. Stiff arm using the right arm with either 3 or 4. Let's think about that for a second. I guess the developer wanted you to be able to stiff arm using either side of the keypad. The 1 and 4 buttons are positioned on the far left side of the keypad, while 3 and 6 are positioned on the right edge. But you don't have the same arm on the same row, so you can't predict that the top row is the left stiff arm and the second row is the right. Maybe the rationale was that the opposite arm is a longer reach if you, for some reason, wanted to use your left thumb to stiff arm. You'd have to stretch your left thumb farther to do the right stiff arm and vice versa. That could be it. A forward-looking benefit of putting the left and right stiff arm buttons on different rows is that if you're playing with a Pro controller, you can use the shoulder buttons to stiff arm, just like you can on the Super Nintendo version. The downside is that the buttons are reversed. Left shoulder button puts out the right arm and vice versa. Moving on, once the play stops, you get a summary of what just happened. The top of the screen is replaced by a blue to black gradient showing in yellow text things like the gain or loss, the down number and remaining yardage, like 9-yard gain, 2nd and 1, and the position on the field, like on the Chargers 42.
Ready, set, hut, height!
After the play, you go to the play calling screen, and there's a whole lot going on here. The very top and bottom are the plays themselves, defense on the top, offense on the bottom, which matches the positioning on the screen in the game. You see 3 across and can choose one of those 3 with the A, B, or C buttons. Or rather, C, B, and A, so from left to right on the screen, matching the buttons left to right on the Jaguar controller. Each play has a name and shows the routes, and you can flip the plays left or right with the D-pad, left or right, a mirror image, and why you'd want to do that depends on where the ball is physically positioned on the field as a result of the last play. There's an indicator on the screen here to show you that. You'll probably want to place your strong side where there's the most open field, left or right, but it's up to you. Okay, so you see 3 plays on the screen at once, and you push up or down on the D-pad to flip through the playbook. There will be a little yellow number in the corner. This is the page number. As you memorize the playbook, because of course you're going to want to memorize the playbook, you can enter the page number on the keypad and then press the hash button to go directly to that page. There are 19 pages of offensive plays and 9 pages for defensive plays. Taking up the center of the screen is the scoreboard. Left or right along the top of the scoreboard you have the down number 1 through 4 and the number of yards that you need to go for the first down. Next you have a green rectangle with a football over it showing where on the field the ball is positioned between the 2 rows of hash marks that run down the length of the field in the center. Top center of the scoreboard is the game clock. To the right of that you have an arrow up or down indicating which side of the field you're on. If you're on your side, it's pointing down. If you're on the opponent's side of the 50-yard line, it's pointing up. The yard number markings on the field indicate this as well. To the right of the arrow is the yard number, and then the play clock, how long you have to call your play and hike the ball. Dominating the scoreboard are the scores, which I guess makes sense. Visiting team on top, home team on the bottom. You see the team name written out in their preferred typeface, and a little football image will be next to the team that has the ball. You see the score broken out by quarter, columns for quarters 1 through 4, with the total on the far right. What you don't see here on the scoreboard, but typically see on a real football scoreboard, is the number of timeouts remaining. Unless you're seeing this screen because somebody just called a timeout. I'll cover timeouts a little later. Once you've chosen your play, if you're on offense, I'm mostly focusing on offensive stuff right now. The manual suggests that you quickly scroll through the playbook so that your human opponent doesn't know what you're up to. The computer seems to do this when you're playing the computer. When you stop scrolling and you're on offense, all the plays are obscured by the NFL logo. If you're on defense and the offense has already chosen their play but you haven't, you'll have a stopwatch sound for about 5 seconds before the computer just picks a play for you, you slacker. If you're in coach mode, this is where you sit back and let your players do their thing, what you're paying them all that money to do. But if you're a control freak who actually wants to run and throw and stuff, let's talk about how you do that. The team will break their huddle, where they've presumably been hanging out waiting for the play to be chosen, and take their positions. The quarterback will say ready, and start counting while he looks around.
Set, hut,
and so forth.
How long is this going on for?
Really, it'll just go on like this until the play clock expires if you let it. So don't, it's annoying. Let's play some actual football instead. From here, lined up on the line of scrimmage, you can do several things. You can call an audible, that is, change the formation to one of your special custom plays. You can choose special play number 1 by pushing A, and special play number 2 by pushing C. The quarterback will say something like,
red 44,
or
green 36,
or
black 22.
There's no pattern, really, from what I can tell. Your players will scurry to their alternate position, and pressing A or C a second time will send them right back to where they started. They don't even seem to get irritated with you when you do this repeatedly. The B button will hike the ball.
Hike!
The quarterback gets the ball from the center, falls back into the pocket created by the offensive line. The receivers run their routes, and so forth. You can move the quarterback around with the D-pad. So you've got 3 players on their routes with the letter following them around, A, B, or C. If the letter is yellow, they're currently open. If it's red, they're covered. That doesn't mean that they won't get away from their defender. They might, but it's a riskier throw. Pressing that corresponding button on the gamepad will throw the ball. If they're close by, it's a handoff or a pitch. If they're downfield, it'll be a throw. If they're so far downfield that you can't actually see them, there will be an arrow above the letter indicating roughly where they are. In a 1-player game against the computer, these letters are always shown. In a 2-player game, they're only shown after you snap the ball. As an alternative to hiking the ball with the B button, you can push the 2 button on the keypad. The 2 button is for auto pitch, to hike the ball and automatically pitch it or hand it off to the running back as long as you're in a running play with a running back ready to receive the ball. If you aren't running such a play, the 2 button will do nothing. Once you hand off the ball, you take control of the runner. When you throw the ball, you'll automatically take control of the receiver, so your job is to guide him to where the ball is going to land, which is marked with the yellow X on the field. This is true at least in veteran mode. It seems more automatic in the easier skill levels. Also in veteran mode, push the B button just at the right time to catch the ball. The manual is confusing about how this works. It says, quote, after the ball is in the air, press B to take over the receiver and guide him to the ball. But in my experience, that doesn't work. You push B when you want to actually catch the ball, and then definitely in Veteran, but less so in the other modes. The crowd loves a caught ball, so they'll cheer. And if you happen to get a first down on the play, they'll cheer again.
First down.
Miss the catch, and the crowd feels your pain. If all your receivers are covered, you can throw the ball away by pushing either 1 or 3 on the keypad. Sure, you don't pick up any yards, but at least you don't get sacked. That is, tackled behind the line of scrimmage, sometimes way behind, and you don't get an interception. There doesn't seem to be an intentional grounding penalty in this game, so you don't need to worry about that. Another option you have is you can turn your quarterback into a runner by pushing 2 or 5 on the keypad. Why would you need to do this? Why not just run? Well, the 1 and 3 buttons change from downing a ball to doing a stiff arm, but you can still throw the ball as long as you haven't crossed the line of scrimmage. If you can get the ball into the opponent's end zone either by throwing or by running, you score a touchdown.
Touchdown!
There are a few different animations the scoring player might do. He might spike the ball, a good old-fashioned touchdown spike. There's a backflip, and there are a few little dances like a moonwalk, or a wavy arm thing, or whatever it's called when you put your hands on your knees and move them left and right, back and forth. After a touchdown, you can choose to try to kick the ball through the uprights for an extra point, or try to run or throw the ball into the end zone again for what's called a 2-point conversion. The latter is riskier, so you typically only want to go for 2 when you're behind and really need the extra point over the extra point.
It's good!
Or
no good.
You don't go to the playbook to decide between an extra point and a 2-point conversion, and you don't line up for a conversion. It's more like a fake kick. Hike the ball and then start moving the ball holder. He'll get up, and you can either try to run with him or throw the ball to one of the labeled receivers. This has been a valid extra point move in the NFL prior to 1994, and after 1994, something like this would give you 2 points instead of 1. So adding a 2-point conversion really seemed to be a minor tweak to the football engine here rather than a major change, which makes me wonder if it wasn't added late in the development cycle. After each score, you'll see a scoring summary on the screen. This includes time of possession, number of plays run, the starting field position, passing attempts, completions, and yards, rushing attempts, yards, and the actual score, like scored on a 11-yard pass to the wide receiver. It should technically read an 11-yard pass, not a 11-yard pass, so your grammar mileage may vary.
Ready, set, hut, hike!
On defense, when you're lined up, you can also call an audible to change your formation on the fly. If you press A, you'll switch to the blitz, attempting to rush the quarterback. C will switch to a man-to-man defense. Again, these work as a toggle so you can undo your audible, if only just to mess with your teammates. On the keypad, you can cycle through the defenders by pushing 1 or 3, and 2 or 5 will make you jump straight up. The B button will choose the defender closest to the ball, which is handy. You don't need to push a button to tackle, just running into the ball carrier is good enough, but you can hit the A button along with the direction on the D-pad to try a diving tackle. As in with offense, the C button will give you a brief speed boost, but you can only do this once per down, so time it well and make it count. By default, a defender near a receiver attempting to catch the ball will try to bat it away, but you can also hit B to go for an interception.
Tip ball. Knocked away. Interception.
I've talked offense and defense, but there are also what's called special teams. Special teams, well, involve kicking the ball, basically. Punts, kickoffs, field goals, extra points. You typically punt the ball when it's 4th down if you want to give the ball back to your opponent on your own terms, ideally pinning them back deep in their own side of the field. You get the same kicking gauge that I described with the kickoff, except with a punt, you can't control left or right until after you hike the ball. It's possible to fake the punt by pushing the 2 or 5 button. The center will hike the ball, and your punter will be able to run or throw the ball. If you are defending a punt, you'll want to choose a punt return formation, but you can also call an audible, press A to try to block the kick, and C to spread out into a prevent defense, like if you expect the offense to fake the punt and go for a pass. On the receiving side of a punt, you can hold down 1 and 3 on the keypad to call for a fair catch. You then catch the ball, but you can't run it. The plus side is that the kicking team doesn't clobber you. Field goals, you'll want to go for a field goal if you've made it deep into your opponent's territory, but it's 4th down and you're not going to pick up the first. A field goal is worth 3 points, so it's better than nothing. Just like the punt, you get the kicking gauge but can't adjust the direction left or right until after the snap. You can fake a field goal by pushing 2 or 5, just like a fake punt, and the defense can likewise call audible A to try to block that kick, or audible C to drop into a prevent defense against a potential pass. At 2 minutes prior to halftime or prior to the end of the game, there's an automatic timeout called a 2-minute warning. Not much to say there, you just go back to the play calling screen. Each quarter ends without any fanfare, just an end of quarter screen. Well, I guess there's this sound. What is that, a gunshot? Cannon? Something like that. At the end of the game, a lot like the scoreboard, you get a scoring summary, the points for each quarter, and then the total at the end. At both halftime and at the end of the game, you get to see the stats for the game, and I do love some stats. You can see the total points scored, the total points allowed, passing attempts and completions, total yards passing, longest gain passing, passing touchdowns, interceptions thrown, rushing attempts, total yards rushing, longest rush, rushing touchdown, field goal attempts, field goals successful, point after attempts, point after successful, longest field goal, longest punt, kick return yards, punt return yards, first downs, third down conversions, fumbles, total turnovers, which includes fumbles and interceptions, and on the defensive side, the number of sacks, interceptions, blocked kicks, and blocked punts. Whew. You can also see each team's record, wins, losses, and ties. Oh, ties. A game can go into overtime if tied at the end of regulation, and it's a sudden death overtime, first team that scores wins. This was the rule back in the 90s, and I understand it's different now. At the end of an overtime period, if both teams remain tied, then that's the end of the game, and it goes down as a tie. I don't know how the game handles this in the playoffs. I didn't get that far, but in real life, you keep playing until somebody scores. Second overtime, third overtime, whatever it takes. But I don't know if you can do that here. After the game, you can hit the option button on the stats screen to look at the standings, all the other teams in the league, and you can cycle through these with the D-pad or the A and C buttons.
Ready, set, hut, hike! Incomplete.
If you're playing in one of the season modes, you're given the option to save or not save that season to the cartridge as you go. You can only work on one season at a time, there's just that one slot. The custom season screen lets you go through each week in the season, 16 games total with no bye week, and you can set the team you want to play in each of those by pushing the A and C buttons to scroll through the helmet designs in either direction. It doesn't show the team or city name, just the helmet, so some familiarity with NFL team logos is assumed. By default, it will fill out a reasonable season featuring each team in your conference twice, once home and once away, just like in real life. The funny thing is that there are no restrictions on how you fill out the custom season. You don't have to have half of your games on the road, you don't have to play each team in your division twice. You can set it to play the Cincinnati Bengals at home every single week if you want. Poor Bengals. Press the B button to toggle home or away, and option to continue. If you play a season to the end, make it through the playoffs, wildcard, divisionals, and championship rounds, and then win the Super Bowl, you get an ending. I have not seen this ending myself, but the two written accounts I found say that it's pretty lame. I think you get a picture of Troy Aikman and the text, "Congratulations, you finally made it to the big time." Not really worth a spoiler alert.
Ready, set, hut, hike!
I found the AI, the artificial intelligence in this game, to be pretty good. The computer-controlled players in the game do a good job of making plays without your direct involvement, so they're not like completely brain dead on their own. I found that the computer manages the clock really well as time grows short, both at halftime and before the end of the game. It'll let the play clock run down if it can, or will call plays quickly if it needs to. This seems to be a feature exclusive to the Jaguar version. On defense, it'll call timeouts if I'm trying to run down the clock, and I've seen the computer go for a 2-point conversion when it's behind, or attempt an onside kick. The play selection seems pretty reasonable too, so yeah, AI not bad at all.
Ready, set, hut, hike! First down.
There are a few controls that I haven't mentioned yet, one of which is the pause button. Either team can pause, and you get the typical Jaguar stuff. Press A, B, or C to adjust the sound level. There's no separate gauge for the music and sound effects, just one overall volume control. And it's made to look like an on-screen TV volume gauge, which I liked. While paused, you can also push 1 and 3 at the same time to hide all the on-screen pause text. You can push the option button during gameplay too, and this will stop the action and give you different options based on what's going on screen. When you're lined up before the snap, pushing option will give you a little menu in yellow text, the word option up top and your available options below that. So before a snap, your option menu consists of one item, push B to call a timeout, and it'll show the number of timeouts remaining at the bottom. Option again to exit this option menu. If you push option right after a play when you see the summary screen, the B button in the menu is joined by the A button for the instant replay. Instant replays are just for your own edification. You can't use them to challenge the ruling on the field like you could do in the mid-90s. This is a video game. After all, the ruling on the field is always correct. Even when it isn't. I had the computer-controlled offense throw a completed pass on me that really didn't look like a completion. Going into instant replay, I could clearly see the ball squirting out of the receiver's hands and hit the ground, but then it disappears for 2 frames before magically appearing 5 yards downfield under the receiver, with the ruling being a catch. Totally not a catch. It's a bug, and I have proof. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes, and I am going to lodge a complaint as soon as I can figure out who actually cares. Anyway, you can use the D-pad to move freely around the field. You get a yellow crosshairs-like cursor, and when the cursor is next to one of your players, it'll snap onto him. The B button will play or pause, while holding down A will fast forward, and C will rewind. You can use the 1 and 3 or 4 and 6 buttons to step backward or forward 1 frame, respectively, and the 2 or 5 buttons will lock the crosshairs on the ball's position. Wherever the crosshairs are locked, that's where the camera will focus while playing, fast-forwarding, or rewinding. If you don't push any buttons for a few seconds, a little diagram will pop up in the corner of the screen showing what the buttons do. Push the option button again to exit instant replay. If you press the option button after a ball has snapped, in the middle of a play, nothing will happen until the ball is downed, after which point the menu will automatically pop up. So you can use this to call a quick timeout if you're trying to stop the clock. It's a handy little touch. Other miscellaneous controls that I haven't mentioned yet are the Jaguar standard 0 button to mute the music, star and hash buttons to reset the game, and from the options screen, holding star, option, and hash will wipe the cartridge memory, restoring it to defaults. The music only plays on the title screen and in the menus. There's no in-game music. Well, mostly. More on that later.
Ready, set, hut, hike!
When you first boot up the game, you get a whole lot of fine print, white text on a black background with copyrights and trademarks and stuff. Licensed by Atari Corp at the bottom. This lasts for about 4 seconds, but can be skipped by pushing one of the fire buttons. Then we get a screen for Williams Entertainment, Williams in the golden script and Entertainment in a fixed-width font below that. The background is bluish-purple with a round W Williams logo repeated over and over, each with the word sports below it. This too lasts for about 4 seconds and can be skipped. Next, we get a 4x4 grid of TV screens, each showing white noise static, which we also hear. These screens are replaced one by one in no particular order with an actual image, and you eventually see Troy Aikman himself positioned like he just got the ball and is dropping back looking downfield as the music triumphantly plays. Behind him is the star logo of the Dallas Cowboys, and behind that a gray screen with dozens of NFL logos. And that's not the last you'll see of that National Football League logo either. It is everywhere in this game. Williams paid money to use it, and by gum, they're going to use it as much as they possibly can. If you hit a button to skip the reveal sequence early enough, you'll skip the music too, but we'll still see the game title screen for several seconds before getting to the menu. The name of the game slides in from the sides, Troy Aikman up top, and then NFL football at the bottom. It takes about 17 seconds to get to this point from the white noise static. After about 36 or 37 seconds, the game will automatically advance to the options screen. You can, of course, skip this long time period with a button. The triumphant march music is replaced by this. In the background here, you see a football field, a close-up of a natural grass field with a few yard lines marked out, and the options are shown within a rough-edged black rectangle in the middle. This is a common motif throughout the game. The top left corner shows the word options in bold white letters, and all 10 of the game options are shown on the screen at once. Top left and top right corners show the competing teams. By default, they are the two teams from Super Bowl 27. You see the football helmet for each team, and their team name at the bottom. The city name is not shown. And above the helmets, the conference and division, like NFC East or AFC West. In between the two helmets are two other options, one indicating which team is playing at home, and this one does show the city name, so hopefully you know which team played where in 1995, or it's going to be a guessing game for you. The other option between the helmets is game mode. This can be single player coach, head-to-head coach, and demo. The other options are presented in a 3x2 grid at the bottom. You have quarter length, season type, difficulty, music and sound effects, penalties on or off, and the type of field and or weather conditions. You move the D-pad around to select which option you want to change, and then the A or C buttons to cycle between them in either direction. The very bottom of the screen will tell you what the buttons do, cycling through them, including the 5 button to see the credits. Ooh, credits. In the credits, the center of the screen is replaced by a blue-tinted image of Troy Aikman in uniform 3 times, and the NFL logo also appears in the upper right corner. I did say it was everywhere, and the credits scroll up from the bottom. Jaguar version by Telegames, lead programmer, additional programming, Jaguar graphics and music, and producer, football engine programming based on the original design, adapted from code by, and finally, player animation, original music, and technical advice. It continues to repeat through the credits until you hit the B button. The menus have a 30-second timeout to them. Do nothing for 30 seconds, and you're shown the title image, this time not represented as a 4x4 grid of TV screens, just a full screen image. After this, you have the attract mode. You see a single play from a random set of teams while the name of the game appears at the top, and a shiny Williams logo appears in the bottom right corner. You get about 7 or 8 of these plays, some are in the red zone, some aren't, and then it's back to the original opening title sequence. The next time through, if you leave it, you might be playing on a different field surface or something. On most of the non-gameplay screens, there will be text at the bottom of the screen saying what some of the buttons do on that screen, and the text cycles every few seconds. A slightly confusing thing about the options screen is that while you can select 2 different teams on the screen, only the top left one is applicable when playing a season. It might have been better if they grayed out or disabled the second team when not playing in a preseason or demo game. Once inside the game, the point of view is above and behind the quarterback. You only see about half the width of the field at one time, and about 30 yards downfield. Before a snap, you can see the game clock in the bottom left corner and the play clock in the bottom right, both as yellow text on a transparent background. These timers disappear when the ball is snapped.
Hike!
The player you're controlling is surrounded by a filled yellow circle after the snap. Before the snap, it's a triangle pointing toward the opponent's end zone. If you're off the screen at the time, it'll show either a 1 or a 2 depending on the player number, with an arrow pointing to roughly where you are on the field.
Ready, set, hut, hike!
All the static graphics, the menu screens and so forth were redrawn for this game by Scott Martindale, and they look different from the Genesis and Super Nintendo versions. Much better, I'd say, with a greatly increased color depth. The in-game graphics are likewise fairly different from what you'd see on the 16-bit ports, and whether or not it's better is debatable. The field is rendered with some detail like a texture for natural turf, but you get a much closer view than you do with the 16-bitters. Your players are therefore larger on screen. The NFL logo is always positioned at midfield, and depending on the home team's conference, you'll either see AFC or NFC logos between the 35 and 40-yard line on either side of midfield. Sometimes you'll see nice little touches like snow piled up at either end of the field if you're playing in the snowy weather. You see the chains on the sidelines indicating the line of scrimmage and the first down marker. Well, I say chains since that's the nomenclature, but you don't actually see the actual chain, just the tall orange markers on either side. Nobody is holding them up, they just stand up on their own. You can't see them all the time given the limited field of view the game provides, so you might even forget that they're there unless you happened by the sidelines in one of your plays. The field is shaded toward the distance, and I don't know, playing this game, it didn't feel like I was playing on a flat surface. It almost felt like I was playing inside a gigantic cylinder, like maybe this game takes place in a future generational starship with a rotating section to produce the effects of gravity for those inside. That's where my mind goes anyway, but really, it didn't feel flat watching the field move. Movement in general is kind of choppy, both in player animation and the movement of the field underneath the players. Players themselves have a few frames of animation for various things like tackles or kicking or whatever, 3 or 4 frames. And the animation looks okay, I guess, just kind of choppy. You don't see team logos on their helmets in-game, just the basic colors. You do have home and away uniforms, but the numbers on the jerseys are all illegible 2-digit numbers. Player names and numbers were not part of the licensing deal, so we just have generic players on field. All the graphics on the field are pretty chunky, the numbers every 10 yards, the NFL and conference logos, and the end zones, which are decorated with the home team's name and helmets. It looks okay at a distance, or if you squint pretty hard, but most of the time it doesn't look very good. It's not flattering at all. The ball looks okay, there's a bit of shading, and unlike Brutal Sports Football on the Jaguar, this one has laces. You don't see any crowd except behind the goalposts, and even then only fleetingly after a field goal attempt or point after touchdown. The crowd, too, was redrawn for the Jaguar version. The stands are divided in half, with concrete stairs going through the center of the stands. It looks like a low-resolution photograph of actual people, and if you look closely, you can see that the crowd is made up of one skinny photo repeated 4 times, mirrored on the left and right sides of the stands. It almost makes sense that you don't see much of the crowd because you don't hear much of the crowd either. They're a fickle bunch and will only cheer for caught passes, first downs, and touchdowns. You'll hear them awe for an incomplete pass, but otherwise they're silent. No background roar or anything. And you can have your running back break a couple tackles at the line of scrimmage and rush for a 28-yard gain, and the crowd remains silent. The game itself is very quiet, aside from the barks of the quarterback and the thuds and oofs and ows of player contact. Tackles and hits will play one of these sounds.
Ouch.
Well, maybe not the last one, but if I could hack it in, I would. There is a small amount of commentary by someone who does actually sound a bit like John Madden. Here's a compendium of all the voice samples I could capture.
First down. Fumble. Incomplete. Injury on the field. Interception. It's good. Backed away. No good. Out of bounds. Tip ball. Touchdown. Turnover on downs.
One more thing will break up the in-game silence, and that's, oddly, some organ music. I counted 4 different ditties.
Right. Ready. Hut. Hut. Hike. Right. Ready. Set. Hut. Hut. Hike. Right.
You might hear this in a baseball game, or probably a hockey game, maybe high school or college football, but not in the NFL, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong, I've never attended an actual professional football game, but it really sounded out of place to me. The actual music in Troy Aikman NFL football, as I said, is very minimal, opening theme and menu theme, and that's it. These were adapted, recreated from the 16-bit ports, and sound muffled to me. They lack any real punch or character.
Ready, set, hut, hut, hike, fumble.
There is a cheat or bug, or both, that'll let you trade timeouts for touchdowns. If you score a touchdown and then immediately hit the option button and call a timeout, you'll get to keep your 6 points and get the ball back on the goal line for another touchdown. This works both ways, so don't call a timeout right after your opponent scores a touchdown. I have a couple other bugs I'd like to mention, things I encountered while testing this game. If the offense fails a 2-point conversion, you'll get a scoring summary for the offensive touchdown, but it'll show the defense's name up top. It may only happen with turnovers. I saw this happen with a recovered fumble and an interception. Also, there is that thing I mentioned earlier where a replay of a completed pass clearly shows the ball hitting the ground and then disappearing and reappearing, apparently, beneath the player who was 5 yards downfield. I took a video of this stepping through the replay because it definitely was some kind of glitch. Or cheat.
Ready, set, hut, hike! First down!
The box has the usual Jaguar layout. The artwork is dominated by a picture of Troy Aikman with his helmet pushed up, staring at you, maybe even into your soul. And there are a couple other pictures of him on the front, each surrounded by a rough-edged white border. The title of the game is up top. You see the name Troy Aikman in all capital red letters with a paintbrush stroke sort of font. The word football is below that in bold white letters over a wide blue paintbrush stroke, and the NFL logo is just off to the left. There's a rather washed out looking screenshot up front, just before a snap, I think, and logos for the non-ESRB A for all ages rating, Williams Entertainment, 1 or 2 players, and the lower black section of the box has the Jaguar logo and interactive multimedia cartridge on the bottom, just like all the other boxes. You'll also find the Jaguar hologram sticker being a third-party release. The back of the box has 4 screenshots. One is a duplicate from the front, seems kind of lazy. One shows play selection 12 seconds into a game between the Bills and the Cowboys. Another in-game picture showing a pass in progress, and the last screenshot shows 2 players building out a custom season. The text on the back is written in an ugly serif font with words in what look like 3 different font sizes. Here's what it says. I'll try to read the larger words in a bigger voice. How would you like to have the best arm in football? You can! All 28 NFL teams. Over 100 real offensive plays and over 50 defensive plays. Battery backup to save your stats. Design your own plays, team, and your own season. Go head-to-head or be the coach. Super smooth animation and lifelike stadium sound. Real weather conditions that affect your gameplay. He's a back-to-back Super Bowl champion quarterback. Can you be one? If I sounded annoying just now reading that off, then I properly conveyed how annoying it is to read. The manual has a lot of extra flair to it, unnecessary embellishments to make it look more interesting. It's a 46-page stapled monochrome booklet, not including the covers, and the inner edges of the pages are designed to look like a spiral notebook. The page numbers all appear handwritten, paper-clipped post-it notes, which is kind of redundant, hand-scrawled notes in the margins, and lots of pictures of the controller, which is kind of necessary given all the different things the buttons do at different times. Toward the back of the manual, you'll find Troy's ratings for all the positions on all the teams. The stars are centered here, but I think they would look better if they were aligned left. This takes up 4 pages, and then you have a 2-page write-up about Troy Aikman himself, and another 2 pages about the Troy Aikman Foundation, a non-profit charity to support the needs of dependent children. This foundation was dissolved in 2016, in case you were wondering, with its $1 million in assets transferred to the United Way of Metropolitan Dallas. There's a page of credits entitled First String, and 2 pages where you can record your wins and losses. I initially thought the manual was a blatant copy of the Super Nintendo version, just with different controller pictures and controls, because on page 25 of the Jaguar manual it says, pressing Y may throw to a receiver, Y being a button on the Super Nintendo but not on the Jaguar, at least the basic Jaguar controller. But after a similar start, the 2 manuals do diverge and have some different artwork. The questionable full-page picture on page 34 being a notable example. In general, I'd say the actual Super Nintendo manual looks a lot better, probably because it's in color. I couldn't track down a copy of the Sega Genesis manual online, so I couldn't compare that.
Ready, set, hut, hike! It's good!
This game is absent from the official Jaguar Gamer's Guide, which focuses on first-party games anyway, and hasn't come up much in the past few episodes. Maybe next time. No print ads focused exclusively on Troy Aikman NFL football for the Jaguar, though there was a small blurb in a magazine promotional insert. I found an ad in EGM2 magazine for the game, but only the Genesis and Super Nintendo versions were mentioned. There are a couple general Jaguar ads that included Troy Aikman, one in the August 1994 issue of EGM, though it ran elsewhere, a 2-page ad called Let the Games Begin, and later in GamePro March 1995 and EGM May 1995, probably others, that says Best Games, Best System, Best Get Off Your Butt and Get One. Neither of these ads show gameplay footage from Troy Aikman, just the Attract Mode title screen or a mock-up thereof, though the latter ad includes a couple of review quotes. The first is from EGM, and it says, "It's really impressive, ... The Jaguar version is the best yet." And the other is from GamePro, which reads, "It has tantalizing innovations and a well-prepared collection of features." There is an actual TV commercial for Troy Aikman NFL football, and it does show the Jaguar box at the very end. The gist of the commercial is that somebody has stolen Troy Aikman's brain, and he's in the huddle mumbling and wearing a vacant expression. There's a link to this ad in the show notes, and here's the audio.
They stole Aikman's brain. It's in Troy Aikman NFL football from Trade West. So now you can play the way Troy plays, with Troy's own favorite plays. Call Troy's two-point conversion. Use Troy's exclusive general manager screen to build a Super Bowl champion.
Going to be a long season.
They stole Aikman's brain. It's in Troy Aikman NFL football. Who would do such a thing?
Let's take a closer look at those reviews. But first, previews. There is a preview in GamePro in August 1994, just really a quick one that focuses on the Super Nintendo, but mentions that the game is coming out on the Genesis and Jaguar too. Later, same magazine, November 1994, there's a quick blurb about the game on the Jaguar, but the screenshots appear to be from one of the 16-bit ports. Actual reviews will start with Electronic Gaming Monthly, February 1995. There were 2 reviewers for this. I think EGM at the time handled reviews of sports games separately from other reviews, those which had 4 or 5 guys giving their opinions. But to make up for the lack of total reviews, each of the 2 reviewing this game have broken down graphics, sound, playability, and realism on a scale of 1 to 4 stars. Both reviewers gave the game 3 stars across the board, except for the reviewer going by the name Iceman, who rated playability 2 stars. Overall scores on a scale of 1 to 10 were 6 for Iceman and 7 for Video Cowboy. This is a full-page review, and you'll be able to find it in the show notes, but briefly it talks about the game in general and mentions several differences from the 16-bit versions, including enhanced graphics on the Jaguar. It says the players are bigger and thus the action more realistic, and that the Jaguar version is the best yet, as the ad claimed. Both reviewers liked the ability to choose plays quickly by entering the page number on the keypad, and liked the new graphics, but say the control is still sloppy, and it's easy to get lost in the pile. The Super Nintendo version was reviewed 6 months prior, and got overall better scores, 80% for Iceman and 84% for the second reviewer, named The Rookie. GamePro magazine, May 1995, reviewed this game, and on a scale of 1 to 5, graphics were rated 2.0, sound 3.5, control 3.0, and fun factor 2.5. It says, easy and pro skill levels are, quote, ridiculously beatable once you figure out key plays. For the graphics, the reviewer said that, quote, like the other Aikman games, frenetic animation makes the players run around in choppy tiptoeing movements, end quote, and that it can be impossible to pick out individual players from the mob. Sounds hold their own, though the player voices and John Madden sound-alike announcers are fine. Ultimately, though, there are better 16-bit football games, including Troy's own clones. In comparison to the Sega Genesis, reviewed 8 months earlier, the graphics on the Genesis version are rated slightly higher, sound a full point lower, but control and fun factor a full point higher on the Genesis. Video Games and Computer Entertainment rated this game 7 out of 10, saying that the game was good, but the reviewer would have liked to see current team stats rather than the stats from the year prior. Overall, on Moby Games, the average score is 58%, with 5 reviews between 68 and 77%, and 3 reviews at or below 50%. There are 2 external reviews on Atari Age, 50% and 40%, with an average of 45%. The Video Game Critic dragged down the Moby Games average with its F rating, 0% on Moby Games, saying that the game has no redeeming qualities at all, and that the game generally looks good until the players start moving. Atari Explorer Online covered this game in their March 1995 issue. Reviewer Randy Magruder liked the computer's time management feature, making the best use of the play clock depending on in-game conditions. He says the graphics are just okay, lacking polish and sizzle. The field is highly pixelated with no attempt at anti-aliasing, and he dislikes that the view is so close to the field that you can't see your receivers. Sound-wise, he said that the hockey-style organ music drove him nuts, and that the voice samples were pathetic. Quote, like a badly sampled imitation of someone with a Madden-like voice, end quote. What's the point without actual colorful commentary, he says. He likes the AI and how different computer-controlled teams behave differently, but found that there were way too many turnovers in a typical game. He also stacked the game up against John Madden Football on the 3DO. Overall, graphics-wise, Madden is better, but gameplay-wise, it's Aikman for the win, mostly because of the AI.
Ready, hike! Injury on the field.
Atari Age lists the rarity as 4 out of 10. B&C Computer Visions has the game listed new for $50, and Video 61 new for $60. On eBay, recent sales were around $16 or $17 loose, $20 to $25 complete. A few current listings are for around $45 to $52 new, $20 used. Is the game worth the current asking price? I can't say for sure, I can't speak for you, but I can give you my opinion of the game right after this. This wasn't a game I sought out for the Jaguar back in the 90s. I'm not a big sports game person. My rich history of video football games includes Super Challenge Football for the Atari 2600, and that one's not bad, and Touchdown Football for the Atari 7800. That one's not good. And then there's NFL Football on the Atari Lynx, which I kinda liked. My brother, he was the one more into sports games. He bought a Sega Genesis like the day after he opened his first checking account. And he might have gotten a football game for that one, a college football game, I think. But honestly, I don't remember. He sold off his Genesis and games a few months later. While I wasn't interested in buying a football game, I do remember the TV commercial and liked seeing the Jaguar box. I thought to myself, the Jaguar is now a serious system. It's got these big-name cross-platform games coming out. I liked the idea of the game, but didn't want to go out and buy it. So this was one of those games that I plugged in to see if it would work, but didn't actually care much to play until this podcast episode rolled around. The first time I actually played the game, for more than like 30 seconds at least, was for this episode. And I didn't actually sit down and play it until late in the research cycle, after capturing music and sounds and documenting the interface. I set up a custom season, all 16 games against the Bengals to make it as easy as possible, poor Bengals, and started playing. Once I figured out how to catch the ball, I actually started getting into it. I mixed in running plays, something other than an occasional quarterback sneak that I never tried before in those other football games I mentioned. I liked that I could hit the 2 button to automatically hike the ball and hand it off immediately. There is yet another excellent guide for this game by B. Hodges on GameFAQs.com, and he didn't care much for the 2 button option because your opponents can see you reaching down to the keypad on your controller to hit it. That's only a problem if you're playing another human, and my kids, well, they had no interest in playing this game, so it was just me against the Jaguar. So using the 2 button was fine with me. I was mixing it up, scoring some points, and it wasn't a bad time at all. With the ability to run the game in a demo mode, I set up a match between the New England Patriots and the Philadelphia Eagles, full 15-minute quarters. And though I couldn't tell it to play the game in Minnesota, It was as close as I could get to having the game play a preview of Super Bowl 52. The Patriots weren't then what they are now, so they didn't fare too well in the simulation. Eagles 40, Patriots 14. I watched the Super Bowl with my family, and we really enjoyed it. It was more entertaining than other Super Bowls in recent memory. But in the back of my mind, I really wanted the scores to match what the Jaguar predicted. And that kind of went out the window after the Eagles' first drive. But still, the game picked the winner and was within 1 point of the Eagles' final score. If anybody said, well, nobody predicted the Eagles would put 40-plus points on the Patriots, you could say, Troy Aikman on the Atari Jaguar did. So there. The things that I generally like about the game include the playbook, both on offense and defense. It's got a lot of plays which you can run. I like the coach mode. I think that if I were to ever play a full season of this game, which I probably wouldn't, but if I did, it would be in coach mode. I was pleasantly surprised by the smarts that went into the computer's play calling and time management. And I liked in general the versatility, throwing the ball away, left and right stiff arm, jumping, juking, spinning. I had a hard time remembering which buttons did what. Keypad overlay would have been nice, but it felt like I was playing a football game, not like slow motion Pong or whatever. My dislikes focus mainly around the graphics and sound. The field sometimes has a tolerable frame rate, but other times not so much. The players move jerkily, and watching the computer play offense, you'd have to assume it knows which player in the massive, jerky, pixelated blob actually has the ball, because I sure don't. The stadium sounds and feels empty. You really don't feel like you're in a stadium at all, except for the bit of crowd you see behind the goalposts. No teammates on the sidelines, no cheerleaders, it's all very lonely. Crowd sounds are infrequent and short-lived. The organ music doesn't fit, and while the voice samples are okay, I don't think there are enough of them. The chunky markings on the field look lame, and sometimes you'll see players inexplicably teleport short distances as they move around. A good solid frame rate goes a long way toward making a game enjoyable, and that's unfortunately not to be found here. I use the No Swear Gamer scale for rating games on this podcast, and this scale uses 4 categories. At the top is Hall of Fame, which means the very best games on the platform, followed by Solid, then Meh. These two are fairly self-explanatory. And finally Trash, which is essentially the opposite of Hall of Fame. The top and bottom categories contain 5 games each, and the rest of the games in the library fall into Solid and Meh. My rating for Troy Aikman NFL Football on the Jaguar is going to be a Meh. It's the only American football game on the Jaguar, and while the football-y core of the game is good, the in-game graphics detract from the enjoyment, so this balances out for me as a meh sort of game. But that's just my opinion. What do you think? I posted a picture from a Jaguar promotional magazine insert about Troy Aikman NFL Football on Facebook, and heard from Kevin, who said, it's okay for the day. Some field scaling effects, but nowhere near the Jags' potential. I don't see a whole lot of scaling effects. It's not like NFL football on the links where scaling is a major feature or gimmick depending on how you look at it. I remember a picture of the Jaguar game on Moby Games, a screenshot with the caption, heavy use of scaling. But I don't see it. Scaling off in the distance, I think, was done better on the 16-bit versions, sad to say. But when you say nowhere near the Jags' potential, I'll agree with that, certainly. Aside from the color use, that is, the colors, especially on the menu screens, make this game look a whole lot better than the 16-bitters. But thank you for your feedback, Kevin, I do appreciate that. Hey, Bishop, do we have any text or audio submissions for Troy Aikman NFL Football?
No.
No? How about general feedback?
No.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Well, then I guess that's going to do it for Troy Aikman NFL Football on the Atari Jaguar. Thank you so much for joining me. I know it's not one of the more popular games on the platform, far from it, but it means a lot to me that you still checked out this episode anyway. Next time we're covering Hover Strike, and this will be followed by Cannon Fodder, Flip Out, and Power Drive Rally. If you have any memories or opinions of these games, anything I've already covered, or the show in general, please send that in, text or audio, to the email address jaguar@gamebygamepodcast.com. All show information can be found on the web at jaguar.gamebygamepodcast.com. I tend to set aside a tangent or two in a section I call Storytime. You can find that right after the music. And now is when I say that there is a lot of good to be found out there in this world of ours, even with widely ridiculed video game consoles. So do try to keep an open mind and a joyful heart. Thank you for listening.
And now, story time with Shinto.
I made an obscure reference a while back when talking about kickoff. I said something like, now that would be your right, not the kicker's right, dude. And this is something that's part of my family nomenclature. We'd rattle it off without thinking about it. It came actually from some smartphone navigation software, OV Maps it was called, and it had turn-by-turn navigation that supported a number of languages that you could download. Kind of saved my butt in Amsterdam. I was trying to get to a data center, but the taxi driver spoke no English, and I only knew enough Dutch to say that I don't speak Dutch. So I had downloaded the Dutch language file, I happened to do that before I left the States, and had my phone walk him through how to get to where I needed to go. One of those language files was called, well, there was English US, English UK, and English Surfer Dude. Surfer Dude was made up of pre-recorded clips, not a synthesized voice, and was, I'm pretty sure, the only novelty type of voice available in the program. So you start navigating, you set the voice to Surfer Dude, and he'd say something like, now at the end of the road, turn left. That would be your left, not my left, dude. I apologize for the lame accent. I am not a native Californian. It would say other things like, in half a mile, turn left, enter the motorway, and let's see what she's got under the hood, dude. Yeah. And if you were speeding, it would say something like, whoa, dude, where's the fire? If the directions included a U-turn, you'd hear something like, now, in 100 yards, take a U-turn, but, not with a handbrake, bro. And when you finally reached your destination, Surfer Dude would say, in half a mile, you'll have reached your destination. No need to thank me, dude. It's who I am. It's what I do. We would turn on Surfer Dude even when we didn't actually need navigation. It was just a fun voice to have giving us directions. OV Maps was bought out and became Here Maps, and I still use it. I like the full offline navigation, download maps for individual states or even entire countries ahead of time. And then you don't have to use data. You don't need a cell phone connection to navigate anywhere around there. It's great. I run it on my offline tablet during road trips, but when the software changed hands, Surfer Dude was let go. He didn't appear on the list of voices anymore. My wife and kids were saddened by his loss. But just yesterday, I checked again, and there he was. Surfer Dude was back. I'm anxious to navigate somewhere now. It'll be like visiting an old friend, whose Californian accent is way better than mine. Okay, about that musical number I did to open the show. It's based off of the Monday Night Football theme recorded by Hank Williams Jr. Was used between 1989 and, 2000-something. But even before recording my first episode of the Atari Jaguar Game by Game podcast, I had it in mind to do a parody of that song for this episode. So since I'd been thinking about it for so long, I couldn't chicken out and not do it, right? And besides, some games need a little extra to make for a more entertaining podcast episode. Fortunately, unpopular games mean fewer downloads, so fewer people had to put up with that intro song.
Aikman football. Join Aikman football. Join Aikman NFL football on the Jaguar. Was our game today? See? That wasn't so hard.
No fair, you cheated.
No, I'm just better than you.